This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up this week, another huge rally in Nicosia called for a ceasefire in Gaza. We talk to a participant who's very familiar with the history.
So my mother was a third-generation Jerusalemite, grew up in Jerusalem, and in 1948 they left their home thinking they were leaving for just a few weeks until the troubles subsided, which is a very familiar story to most Palestinians. And they were never allowed to return, never compensated for their losses, and ended up as refugees in Cyprus, where they rebuilt their lives.
Contractors building roads in Akamas are ignoring the legally binding conditions of the Akamas Plan.
There were conditions that this is kept to 4 meters, and there are points where we recorded up to 12.5 meters width.
And the Confederation of Organisations for the Disabled are demanding that the Radiomarathon be scrapped.
All organizations, members of our Confederation and others are against this activity.
Another march took place in central Nicosia this week, this time calling for a ceasefire in Palestine. One of the people who was on the march and who has kindly given us her footage to show on the programme this week is Marina Parisinou. Marina, thanks for joining me. This is something I think that's very close to your heart. Tell me more.
Thank you, Rosie. Yes, it is. I am a Cypriot, but my mother was a Greek Palestinian from Jerusalem, so it is a cause very close to my heart.
And you go to Jerusalem, I think, fairly regularly, and you were even there the day all of this started.
I do, and yes, I was. I've been visiting Jerusalem over the last so many years regularly, and I was there on Saturday, October 7th, when the whole thing blew up, and managed to get on a flight and leave earlier than planned.
How does this all make you feel? Because it's not something new, is it? It's every 3 or 4 years we have Gaza being bombed, but this is worse this time, I think.
It is worse, absolutely worse. But as you said, it's been going on for years. In fact, it's been going on since 1948, when my own family lost their home there, and it doesn't seem to get any better.
Tell me more about your family. I suppose you're talking there about the Nakba.
Yes, I am. So my mother was a third-generation Jerusalemite, grew up in Jerusalem, and in 1948 they left their home thinking they were leaving for just a few weeks until the troubles subsided, which is a very familiar story to most Palestinians. And they were never allowed to return, never compensated for their losses, and ended up as refugees in Cyprus, where they rebuilt their lives.
So one could say they were really quite lucky that they managed to get out to Cyprus, because of course the problem for all the people trapped in Gaza more recently is that they can't leave.
Absolutely. I mean, they had a hard time, and yet they were the lucky ones, along with all sorts of other Palestinians in the diaspora. The ones that are trapped in Gaza, as you said, they've been living through hell for so many years.
The problems are still rife as well in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, I think. Are you going to go back there at some point, Marina?
I'd like to, but I'd have to wait until all this subsides, because I'm doing research, and it's very hard to be asking people to talk to you and be working with you when all this is going on. Everybody's sort of shell-shocked, both sides actually.
And let's talk about both sides, because I'm sure you know many Israelis as well from your time there.
I do. Well, not many, but I know several. Almost by default, are more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, but at the same time, they also suffered through this latest Hamas assault. My researcher is very pro-Palestinian, very anti-Zionist Israeli Jew, and yet they were going through a very hard time because his father-in-law was in one of the kibbutz that were attacked first, and they didn't have news of him for a very long time.
I hope the news was good at the end, was it?
He managed to escape. They were evacuated.
Okay, let's come back to Cyprus and that march. It was big, wasn't it? Can you estimate how many people were there?
It's a bit hard to estimate, but I would say about 1,000, perhaps more.
And the feeling there, the people you spoke to, because it wasn't just the march around certain areas of the town, I think starting at the Interior Ministry, but then there was a vigil at the end.
Yes, there was. People were energized. Their main call was for a ceasefire. They expressed frustration at our own government, particularly our president, Nicosia, for abstaining on the vote for a ceasefire at the UN.
That, to me, and I think to an awful lot of Cypriots, was quite extraordinary when we bear in mind that we are ourselves a country under occupation, partial occupation anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So they are cross with the president for abstaining, but do they feel that there's anything they can do, or whether these marches are having an impact?
A lot of people kept saying this is a drop in the ocean, but at the same time, we all felt that we need to stand up and be counted, because without this, then without protesting, then we give carte blanche to the politicians to carry on.
Marina Parisinou, thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us about that march, and I have a suspicious feeling it won't be the last one. Many thanks.
My pleasure, Rosie.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
After so many years of deliberations, the Akamas Plan was finally approved, and at the time it seemed that the environment was going to be protected. But is it? BirdLife Cyprus volunteers have been down to see what's happening with regard to the expansion of the road network, and Vasiliki Anastasi joins us to tell us what she's found out. Not a good picture, I gather, Vasiliki.
Not at all, not the picture we would like to see after so many discussions and deliberations, indeed. As people who follow this issue know, there's been a plan proposed for the sustainable development of the National Forest Park of Akamas. This includes a number of interventions within the National Forest Park. Some of them are very positive. Some of them had raised the concerns of the environmental NGOs, including BirdLife Cyprus. And today, unfortunately, we see that there was a very valid reason to worry.
Now, my understanding is that there were very clear conditions under which these interventions should be made, and I thought they were legally binding.
Exactly as you mentioned, Rosie, they were legally binding conditions that were issued by the Environment Department as a result of the environmental impact assessment of this plant and the impact it could have on the protected areas. So there's been a number of conditions that have to do with the improvement of the road network. And today we witness some of these conditions being breached.
Like what?
On the ground. At this moment, we're at the first phase of road improvement in the national park, which includes the stretch from the entry to Akamas from Beia, so the entry in Aspros Potamos for people who know the area, through Doxeftra and up to Lara Beach, including the perpendicular road that includes Avakas Gorge. So this is the first phase of the road improvement works. And there were conditions, for example, that for the majority of this road network, the width will remain at 5.5 meters. There are locations on this road network where there were up to 11 meters of road width recorded. For example, around Lara, which is one of the most ecologically sensitive areas, there were conditions that this is kept to 4 meters, and there are points where we recorded with our fellow organization, Terra Cypria, we recorded up to 12.5 meters width.
Well, you don't need 12.5 metres to make a road that is just supposed to be an access road.
Exactly. And regardless, as long as there's a legally binding condition that dictates the width of the road, I don't think we are at the moment in a position to be discussing road width. It was set in stone, so we say. So we shouldn't be at this moment, negotiating road width.
Let me ask you whether or not you've managed to contact the contractors and ask them why they are not obeying the rules that were set down.
Well, as environmental organizations, we contacted the authorities who are in charge of this project and who are in charge of following the conditions, and we are still waiting a response.
That'll be the Department of the Environment, I take it, is it?
Yes, the Environment Department is in charge of making sure that the protection status of Natura 2000 sites, and also the Department of Forests, who is the project owner, so to say, in this case. We have also witnessed other breaches of conditions. We haven't seen anybody being present while this construction is taking place, which is something that was part of the conditions, to have somebody to check. And we've seen lots of earth being turned over on habitat, which is also a condition that's being breached. Further to that, the first promise that was made for this plan to start was that all the illegal establishments that have been in the area, some of them for decades, would be removed before any further projects were done in this area. And we are here so many years later. The illegal establishments are still on site, and we feel that all this development, so to say, is adding instead of controlling the conditions in the area.
We're talking about restaurants, kiosks and so on, pretty close to the beach, aren't we?
Yes, some of them, yes.
So what can you and the other NGOs do about this, Vasiliki? We all know that you're going to have to hassle the relevant authorities because you won't get an answer unless you, in a sense, force them to answer.
Of course, we will continue to pressure, and what we have asked is that all construction work that has to do with the National Forest Park plan stops immediately until the authorities can go actually on site and see firsthand whether or not breaches have been made to the conditions of the environment authorities. Wherever necessary, any restoration takes place, because we're talking about areas that have to be restored back, and to stop any further breaches to conditions of this plan, which is a plan with many parts. I mean, there's still a long way to go until the entire plan is put in place.
Well, it does seem to me that the relevant authorities should be having somebody on site pretty permanently to make sure that the conditions are not breached.
Of course, and this is also part of the conditions, to have somebody on site. And as we mentioned, we hadn't seen somebody on site. And this is an issue for many reasons. For example, this improved road network will, of course, make Akamas more accessible, right? Then if it's more accessible, then you have a bigger visitation. You have more people visiting the site. And if you have more people visiting the site, but you don't have more people checking the site, then it's a vicious cycle of problems.
And we already have such a problem here with maintaining our biodiversity, don't we?
Of course, of course. There's a lot of doubt created now around the promises that this plan has made, and we are very worried about it.
I would think all Cypriots who value our environment are worried about it. Do keep us informed, won't you, Vasiliki, how this progresses and whether or not the authorities were actually trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes when they approved this plan, or whether there are plans for further development that we probably don't even know about yet. Many thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
Since 1991, there's been an annual appeal to raise funds for people with disabilities here in Cyprus. It's called Radiomarathon, and it's happening around about now until almost the end of November. Joining us to talk about it, because I think that some of the organisations involved in receiving the proceeds of this appeal are not exactly happy with the way it's organised. The president of the Cyprus Confederation of Organisations of the Disabled is Christakis Nikolaidis. Christakis, many thanks for joining me. What is the problem? I know you get some money each year, but you're not very happy, I think, with the way this is run. What is the problem?
Yes, this activity is taking place in Cyprus since 1990. From the beginning, a few organizations at first, amongst them the Pan-European Organization of the Blind, were totally against this activity because it's a charity activity and it has nothing to do with the rights of persons with disabilities. It refers or relies on the medical model of disabilities, which is taking into consideration that persons with disabilities are not able to act their rights, to take their responsibilities their own, and other people can do that for them. This is also the recent general motto of our organization: nothing without us. So everything is taking place in Cyprus about persons with disabilities should be implemented with the involvement of our organization. But this is not the fact, it's the second factor why we are against of this activity. First, I told you is that it is a charity activity and not an activity compatible with a social right-based agenda and models, which were also adopted by the whole world community in 2006. And secondly, this is taking place without any consultation with our organizations. So none of the organizations of the blind is supporting this activity. All organizations, members of our confederation and others are against this activity.
But do you, sorry, Christakis, do you mean you don't want it to be run at all, or that it's wrong because it is not inclusive of the people that it's aimed to help?
We want it to be cancelled. We don't want to stop this activity because it violates our rights, persons with disabilities as persons who have social rights, carers of social rights. It is not compatible with this.
All right, but you have over the years received considerable amounts of money. Well, you haven't, but I think that a lot of people with disabilities have been helped.
I don't know people who receive this. I don't know. Our organization do not receive any amount and did not receive at all also throughout the years. We don't receive money from this activity. It would be also not fair to receive money, and we are against. But we did not ask, we did not receive from anybody money from Radiomarathon.
No, but some people, sorry Christakis, let's get this very clearly. Some people with disabilities over the years have, I think, received financial assistance. Is that right?
far as I know, they are still giving some money to people for example, logotherapy or physiotherapy, 500 euros per year. That is what I know today. According to their accounts, they have given last year, from November to today, 88,000 euros to children with health problems, they say. They don't mention the word disability because they know we're against, and it can cause our jurisdiction procedures against this, because we know we can use now and the court against this activity. So they are very careful. And secondly, they give 100,000 euros to institutions and other organizations for the disabled, not of the disabled. It means not organization of persons with disabilities, but organization who support them. We don't know which, but we still want that this parody, this committee should stop, because these 2 days it will be very bad time for us. Many people with disabilities feel totally upset of this, to talk in the radio all the day about us, third parties, foreign people. They don't know a lot about persons with disabilities. They go and talk there, and then they cry. That is not, we're living in the 21st century. What is this situation? We don't like this. We don't to stop. We are the one to have to say to this.
Are you saying that this event actually, in a sense, promotes the general public to separate people with special needs or disabilities from the general population and somehow look down on them and feel sorry for them? And is that the problem, that they should be more included in the general population?
Yes. They are not allowed, they are not responsible, eligible to make this activity for persons with disabilities without either asking them. Yes, we don't want, in 2006 and in the United Nations, in 2011, Cyprus adopted the human rights, the Convention for the Human Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which put an end to the approach of disability as charity, with a charity manner, and said persons with disability has their own, their social rights as all other people, and they are decided for themselves. They can decide it. Also, they ask us from the United Nations to create an organization for persons with intellectual disabilities. This Radiomarathon, at the beginning, they wanted to support persons with intellectual disability. You know, these are a group of persons who used to be considered as a group where they cannot decide for themselves. They cannot talk and say what they want, what they need. But nowadays, there are several ways to support them in order to take their own decisions. And the United Nations, they ask us to, and we have already a new organization of persons with intellectual disabilities. We have a service in our confederation who support them to make their decisions. If they want to go out from the institution, if they go to work, if they want to marry, which are, of course, in Cyprus still taboo. But in many countries, they have a very big step forward to this, because such activities like Radiomarathon were taking place also in Germany and France from 1969 to 1973. But after the complaint of the organization there, they stopped them. In Cyprus, we are not able to stop it because there are additionally interests from companies who receive the money and put in their accounts and use for different reasons. You remember this, what happened in 2013. In 2012, I remember parents of children with disabilities asked for support from Radiomarathon. They told them, we don't have money. It was April, you wait until next year, we collect money in November and we give you. And after this crisis come, they shave money from different organizations from the bank, and among these organizations was Radiomarathon. It seems that they had 2 or 3 million euros in the bank, which they didn't use. And they were making investments. It's not allowed. That was said also the European Union. Financial problems with Radiomarathon. And as I told you, they collect last year 500,000 euros, and they give until now, November until now, 188,000. Where is the rest? Who knows that?
Okay, Christakis, we have to draw an end to this because we're running out of time. Let me just ask you, surely the accounts of Radiomarathon are audited, are they not? All charity organisations have to give the Interior Ministry audited accounts and hold general assemblies and so on.
Yeah, yes, they give, but we have still questions. We have questions and nobody answers. We release a press announcement about all this. Nobody answered to us. And they continue this fiasco also in 2 days to run throughout the country with cars to collect the money. And of course, the community, if they know from this big governmental radio station that they want the money to give to people who have health needs and need health support, they give the people, of course. It's very logical. But it still gives a very bad, the last one, the very bad image to our country, because in no other country there is such a similar action in this extent, like in Cyprus, where the government, the wife of the president respectively goes and try to increase the popularity of the government, the ministers, the member of the parliament, go and take pictures, giving some money for the Radiomarathon.
All right, Christakis, I'm really sorry, but we're out of time, so we have to wrap this up. I think basically you're saying that the people in Cyprus who have disabilities or special needs feel that they're being patronised, and that certainly political people perhaps are trying to take advantage of it and come out, well, smelling of roses,
they have
as
to
we
give
say.
an end to this immediately.
Okay.
It got expired. Thank you very much.
That is Christakis Nikolaidis, who's the president of the Cyprus Confederation of Organisations of the Disabled.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
And in other news this week, the Health Insurance Organisation is taking a close look at how many surgeries are carried out on the island. Reports emerged earlier this week of over 90,000 operations being done in the space of 1 year within the state healthcare system, GESI. That corresponds to about 1 in 10 beneficiaries of our National Health Service. That's a cause for concern in itself, but it also raises the very pertinent question as to how many of these surgeries are truly medically necessary, and therefore whether doctors, particularly in some specialties, are scalpel happy. Reports emerged of a woman who said her gynecologist took repeated biopsies of doubtful indication and told her many times that she needed a hysterectomy. It was only when she went to a different gynecologist that she was assured that there was no reason to undergo such a surgery. Since our health system is very difficult to sustain the way it's run at the moment, any surgeries that aren't necessary are putting an added burden on the system. Experts have warned that we must safeguard the system from abuse, and patients should make the health insurance organisation aware if they suspect that a doctor is not being genuine. A spokesman for the Patients Association, OSAC, said, "It's all really common sense. We can judge when something doesn't seem right, but it would be a big mistake for patients to distrust all doctors." Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.